Welcome to the Lebanon Community Development Corporation meeting. Today's Monday, June. I'd like to. Sorry about that. Welcome to the Lebanon Community Development Corporation meeting. Today on Monday, the 24th, 2024. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Roll call.
Here.
Missy Krulik.
Here.
Corey Coots.
Here.
Brian Kirschbaum.
Here.
Okay, the first order of business is election of officers. We have president, secretary, and treasurer that needs to be filled.
I move for Missy Krulik to be president.
I'll second.
With a second. Any other discussions? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye. Whew, you're official now, Missy.
Great. Okay, so secretary. Corey?
You said it.
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion that Corey be secretary.
I will second.
Any other discussions? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right. Last up is treasurer.
I bet everyone at home is guessing, but I would like to nominate Mr. Brian Kirschbaum as treasurer.
Very good.
I second that.
Okay. Any discussions? All in favor?
Aye. Motion carries. Look at that. Our slate is now made.
All right, so there is none, so we'll move on to new business. Rob?
Thank you, members and Mr. President. Resolution 2024-01 is a resolution with the Cardin Associates athletic facility, and it's a resolution accepting a grant from the Redevelopment Commission and the approval of a disbursement agreement. Mr. Ben Bontrager can give you a little bit of background on this, and then I can fill in where needed as well.
Thanks, Rob. Members of the board, a little bit of background here. I think everybody at this point is familiar with the Hickory Junction Fieldhouse project. Fieldhouse is complete, and they've been taking guests and visitors since February of this year. That project, when we started, we phased the infrastructure. The phase one infrastructure was part of a bond that was funded in 2022. A little over $10 million was funded for that phase one infrastructure, and that was essentially just to get infrastructure in the ground to serve the field house and make sure that could get up and running as soon as possible. It's always anticipated there would be a phase two infrastructure project to complete all of the infrastructure to serve the entire development, all 95 acres, then also run the infrastructure to the property's edge so that we could then think about developing other properties in the future to the east and to the south. That phase two infrastructure, as you can imagine, the number has gotten larger over the last few years, both because of projects that have been added to it by NDOT, but then also just because supply and demand has caused the cost to implement infrastructure increase. So we've got about a $12 million price tag to the phase two infrastructure. When Cardin Associates first came to us to talk about how to implement that phase two, the first request ask was for the city to issue a $12 million bond, which just was not something that the city had the appetite for. So what the compromise was is there was going to be a $6 million bond issued by the Redevelopment Commission to cover half the cost of that infrastructure. The final $6 million was going to be a loan that Cardin Associates, the developer, was going to secure. And it is an interest-only loan for 3 years. And what the bank has requested is a commitment from the city to fund those interest payments for that 3-year period. And the math may be changing as we speak, but it's the total loan looks like it's going to be about 6.7 million based on the bank's numbers, with a total potential interest payment of about $1.7 million. So it's maybe slightly, like Rob will probably go into some more detail. It might be slightly different than the numbers that are in the agreements they're looking at. So, but the RDC just considered that in a meeting about half an hour ago and revised those numbers to cover that total cost in case they're needed. The bank also, one of the other bank requirements with Cardin Associates was that as they sell property within that development, a percentage of the proceeds of those sales are required to go towards paying down the principal on that loan. So over the 3-year period, that 3-year interest-only loan, they will be buying down the principal. Thus, the commitments of the CDC and the RDC will also decrease as that principal decreases. So what we need the RDC and the CDC to approve of is the maximum amounts, with the anticipation be that it's going to be something smaller than that as a buy down. So in terms of the structure, the reason the CDC is involved is because it gets a little bit muddy about the RDC entering directly into agreements for this sort of financial structure. So what then the structure then is the RDC approves of a grant to the Community Development Corporation. And then the Community Development Corporation then uses those grants for economic development purposes, which in this case will be in an agreement between the CDC and Cardin Associates to then make those interest payments. So that's what's before you here tonight is a resolution and agreement whereby the CDC would enter into that agreement with Cardin Associates to essentially make those interest payments with the grant money that is secured from the RDC. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions, and Rob can kind of give you some updates on some conversations that happened over the last, probably over the last 10 hours, essentially.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Bontrager. So members of the board, one of the things that I know not all of you were able to be there last Thursday at the working session, but Cardin Associates was there to talk about, give us an update on the project and everything that is going on. As Mr. Bontrager indicated, that phase 2 of the public infrastructure is ready to move. They would like to move yesterday if they could. There's a number of projects the developer has indicated that they're literally ready to sign agreements, but they need to get the public infrastructure finalized in order to do this. What you have seen before, you have a resolution, and you also that is authorizing the grant agreement, the acceptance of the grant from the Redevelopment Commission. And that amount that we had previously been advised was an amount of not to exceed over a 3-year period, $1,542,750. We've been in discussions with the bank, and as early as a few hours ago today, we understand that number may be a little bit higher. So we've, the RDC in this meeting before approved amendments to the grant agreement in the amount not to exceed over a 3-year period, $1,700,000 for a total loan of $6,600,000. Now, doesn't mean that we have to do this. And what we talked about at the Redevelopment Commission is that if anything substantively changed, we would come back before the Redevelopment Commission to address it. And I would make that same statement here. What you have before you is a resolution that at least would accept the grant that the Redevelopment Commission has already approved. And then we would also need to modify, if you're willing, the disbursement agreement to those same amounts. So it would be an amount not to exceed $1,700,000 over a 3-year period. We are just also to make you aware of, we have a call tomorrow with the city's financial advisor, Baker Tilly, to talk through these things. We also anticipate here shortly, within the next few days, we'll be able to get the loan documents from the bank. And again, if anything would substantively change, then we would just need a reset and come back to the meeting. So what the Redevelopment Commission did was authorized these changes to the grant agreement. And then I would say if this board is desirous to do the same, we would need to authorize that change to the grant agreement as well as the disbursement agreement. And there's a reference in the resolution, and it would authorize the president, in this case, Missy, you, to be able to work with legal counsel to finalize anything and effectuate the intent of what's going on here. So that's the update. And I know, Mr. Cooch, you were at the last read.
And Rob, I was reading through the resolution. Does it appear that the secretary also, in the absence of the president, could sign, I think, in this?
That's correct. Yes.
Right. Okay.
So these would be the same payment totals, only adjusted for the higher principal. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Schedule?
Yep. Well, it may change a little bit. It's just an amount. At this point, what the developer presented at the working session was they anticipate that it would be a monthly reimbursement I think there, in all likelihood, there may be some discussions about whether or not that needs to be monthly or some other period, and whether it's on a semi-annual or annual basis. I think if you remember during the working session, the developer said we can work through those issues. I think, again, if they become substantive, we'll just, notice up a meeting and reconvene if necessary.
Makes sense to me.
So from a motion perspective, then we would first look at amending to match the amounts passed through the RDC earlier, which would be the 6.6 million total loan and 1.7 million in our case, the disbursements, as a not to exceed number.
Yes, and I think both those numbers are set out in the grant agreement and the disbursement agreement, so I think you could do it in one motion,
Okay.
and then we would want to address the resolution separately.
Okay. So if it's all right, Madam President, I would go ahead and make the motion to amend the grant agreement and disbursement resolution or disbursement agreement to both indicate the updated amounts of a not to exceed for 6.6 million on the loan amount and 1.7 million on the interest paid amount.
Okay, we have a motion on the table. Do we have a second?
I'll second motion.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Okay, now with the resolution 2024-01, we would want to have, you were provided, again, this resolution that has the disbursement agreement as Exhibit A and the grant agreement as Exhibit B. And it also had an amount with the CDC's contribution of $1,542,750. We've just amended that in the grant and disbursement agreement. So I would ask if you will amend this as $1,700,000.
Okay, so we need a motion.
I would also motion that we amend Resolution 2024-01 to reflect the same numbers, which would be that 1.7 million as a not to exceed number.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I will second the motion.
All right. Any other discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
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 All right, motion carried.
Madam President, now I'll go ahead and read this resolution 2024-01 is a resolution that accepts a grant from the City of Lebanon Redevelopment Commission and it approves the Lebanon Community Development Corporation entering into a disbursement agreement with Card Associates Athletic Facilities, LLC. So whereas this Community Development Corporation is a nonprofit corporation organized pursuant to Indiana Code. It's a neighborhood development corporation pursuant to Section 12.2 of Indiana Code. Card Associates Athletic Facilities, the developer, is a limited liability company organizing and operating under the state of Indiana. And as you're aware, Card, or the developer in this case, has developed the Fieldhouse project as well as certain public infrastructure projects. And the CDC and the RDC have determined that it's in the best interest of the CDC and the RDC for the developer to pursue financing to assist with completing the development of a portion of the project, really the public infrastructure piece that we were talking about. That's defined as the developer loan. And again, that amount will not exceed for this body an aggregate amount of $1,700,000 pursuant to the disbursement agreement and the grant agreement that are set forth in Exhibits A and B. Therefore, be it resolved that this body will accept the grant. The CD will execute and deliver any other agreements, including but not limited to the grant agreement and the disbursement agreement, to carry out the actions that are necessary with the grant. The president of the CDC is authorized to execute and deliver all the agreements and documents contemplated by this resolution to be executed and delivered by the CDC. In the absence of the president, and/or the secretary, then the secretary will be authorized to execute and deliver all the agreements contemplated by this resolution and delivered by the CDC. And this resolution shall be in full force and effect immediately upon its adoption. And then I would just, as I indicated earlier, authorize the president or the secretary to take any necessary steps with the RDC and the BISA legal counsel to finalize all these actions. And again, if anything is substantively changed, we'll be back before you to address those changes.
The resolution's been read, so we entertain a motion to accept the resolution 2024-01.
I move to accept the resolution 2024-01 as amended, and then authorize either the president or secretary to work with both the RDC and legal counsel to finalize any documentation.
All right, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a second. Any other discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, motion carries. Any other business before commission? Okay, then I will take a motion to adjourn.
Second. I will motion to adjourn.
I'll second that one.
All right,
Sorry.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, we are adjourned.